What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it looks like this weekend we have some pretty big game announcements coming up, and in fact, some of them have leaked out a bit early for Ubisoft's Forward event that will be taking place Saturday. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a new gaming handheld system that we covered previously, but now it looks like with their latest update, Capcom is getting involved with their games. And we're also going to be touching on Cyberpunk 2077 as we had a teaser for their next big expansion for 2023. And you know what? This game seems to be having a bit of a turnaround online. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Xbox Game Pass for the first half of September. We can see this card over on news.xbox.com, starting with some of the games that were available actually going into the service yesterday with Disney Dreamlight Valley. That's the Founders Edition for cloud, console, and PC. We have Opus Magnum, that's PC. Train Sim World 3, console and PC. Moving to September 13th, we have Ashes of the Singularity on PC. DC League of Super Pets, that's cloud, console, and PC. Moving to September 14th, You Suck at Parking, that's cloud, console, and PC. Then up to September 15th, we have Despo's Game, console and PC. And then Metal Hellsinger, PC and Xbox Series X and S specifically. Now, the big thing that caught my eye with this announcement for Game Pass are all of the games that will be leaving September 15th. So you want to pay attention just in case there are any of these you wanted to grab out of the service. You'll have about a week or so to try to get through them, starting with A Plague Tale, Innocence, Origami 2, Bug Fables, Craftopia, Final Fantasy 13, Flynn, Son of the Crimson, I Am Fish, Lost Words, Mighty Goose, Skatebird, and The Artful Escape. The unfortunate thing with subscription services is, yes, games will also leave. But out of the games going in, I'm very interested in Metal Hellsinger, mostly because it's just such a unique take on the first-person shooter genre, bringing this rhythm element in. So I will certainly be checking that one out September 15th when it releases. Also, PlayStation did announce another PSVR 2 game, which is Firewall Ultra. I'll admit, I didn't really play a lot of Firewall Zero on, well, now the current PlayStation VR, but I do like some of the first-person shooter VR games, and where we are with technology, this one certainly looks pretty interesting for their upcoming headset. We have some of the trailer here. They also released an entire PlayStation blog post kind of detailing this further, mentioning that it will take advantage of some of the new features of PSVR 2, and that it is set 5 years after the original game. The contractors' locations you've grown to love have evolved and moved into the next generation. This would also look like another one of their live service games. Remember they said that it had 10 of them in development, and I think they're going to be all over the place, which does include PlayStation VR 2. So I'm interested in what we're seeing here with Firewall Ultra. Once again, though, we just need to know when this headset's coming out and how much it's going to cost, which I assume we're going to find out more of that as we get closer to the end of the year. Oh, and we did have a new collection announced for PlayStation, specifically when it comes to the color scheme of their different accessories and even the side panels on your PlayStation 5. We can see this posted up by PlayStation on Twitter. Great news hiding in plain sight, announcing a new gray camouflage collection. Perfect timing with all the Metal Gear Solid stuff that's being rumored. Anyway, pre-orders begin September 15th. It looks like they have this set up for the controller, the DualSense controller, the headset, and then the 2 panels for your PlayStation 5. And I really hope that this means we will see something for God of War, like something for Spider-Man 2 next year. And the fact that we are seeing more and more panels from them, they did like their Galaxy collection, now we just see camouflage, which these are more generic color schemes. They're not necessarily tied to any one game, but I hope they do something like this for God of War, where you get different panels for the sides of your PS5. But hey, if you're looking for a camo design for your PlayStation 5 system or a controller or your headset, you can check those out when they go up live for pre-orders on September 15th. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get to the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Ubisoft Forward, because it seems like almost all of their presentation has leaked online. Like, we know so much of what's going to be there, and it does sound like it's gonna be very Assassin's Creed heavy. So hey, if you're an Assassin's Creed fan, you're gonna be pretty happy when this goes live. But let's talk about some of the stuff that'll be there outside of Assassin's Creed quickly before we get to all these different titles in that series. First, it does look like Ubisoft will be talking more about Mario & Rabbids Sparks of Hope. They could just show new gameplay, maybe a new setting, because it seems like we're going to be traveling around in space, so we could see a new planet or something there. But at this point, I've seen enough of that game, and of course, we have Kingdom Battles to go off of, so I'm just ready for that one to release in October. I'm picking it up day one. On top of that, it appears The Division Heartland, the page for that on PC went live yesterday, which we assume it's going to be at this presentation then, and who knows, maybe it'll have a beta, or they could just shadow drop it. I guess this is kind of like their Battle Royale live service, PvE, so player versus enemy, and then you also go on raids and all these different things. We need more information around this game because they've kind of described it in a very vague, roundabout way in previous media releases. But the big thing that people are really interested in now is Assassin's Creed, as it looks like they're just going all out with this series. And you'd kind of expect them to, because Assassin's Creed Valhalla was very successful for them overall when it comes to sales. So if we take a look over here, this is from Tom Henderson over on Tryhard Guides. He has a TLDR at the bottom we'll look at, but I will also link to this page where he goes into much more detail around these different titles. But I mean, just take a look at this. There's 6 different things being outlined here. Assassin's Creed Mirage, which we have talked about quite a bit. That's the game where they're going back to basics, as has been said, for Assassin's Creed. And it could also be kind of a smaller project compared to Valhalla that people are getting hundreds of hours out of. Seems like this would be more of a bite-sized Assassin's Creed, as it started off reportedly as an expansion for Valhalla, and then they kind of spun it off into its own game. So I'm interested in that one. And then we have Assassin's Creed Project Red. That is the game that will have the Japan setting. Then we have Assassin's Creed Project Hex. That's Central Europe setting. It also talks a bit about like a darker Assassin's Creed overall. So that one sounds like it will be a very unique title. As Tom Henderson says, it's in development at Ubisoft Montreal and will take players in the darkest Assassin's Creed game ever. It's understood that Project Hex is set during the witch hunt era in 16th century Europe. Now, those are 2 that would build off of this like Assassin's Creed Infinity platform that I assume is going to tie all these games together with experience, levels, currency, all these different parts. So your progress won't feel like it's tied to any one game. And I've seen people talk about this a bit more online around Assassin's Creed and how that actually excites them, because then they won't feel like they spent 150 hours in Valhalla and they won't get anything out of it for the next one. So we'll see how Ubisoft does and how many currencies they have for the platform. And then we have Assassin's Creed Project Jade. That's a mobile game, it looks like. So it's China setting. Assassin's Creed Project Nexus, that's in VR. And then we have Assassin's Creed Valhalla DLC. So yeah, quite the turnout for Assassin's Creed, with 6 different items that are being listed here. And it seems that kind of the timeline of events for some of the major releases, Assassin's Creed Valhalla and then Mirage, would be next year. You could see like Valhalla maybe first half of next year with the DLC, and then Mirage follows that up. And then going into 2024 is when they would look to spin up their Assassin's Creed Infinity platform, with the first one being Assassin's Creed Red, and then go into Assassin's Creed Hex in 2025. So I'm curious how that platform's going to look and how they tie everything together. But for me, Assassin's Creed Mirage sounds interesting because it's not necessarily lining up as to how we've seen Assassin's Creed recently, with all the RPG elements and it being this 100-some-odd hour game for the sake of just being a long game. So yeah, I'd like to see more of Mirage, and I guess we're going to see all about these different projects to some degree this Saturday, so we'll see what they have. Next up, let's talk about the Evercade EXP handheld console. We had talked previously about this as Evercade, who has like their own console, and they'll sell cartridges that are collections of older retro titles, was going to be making a handheld, and it looked pretty cool. It was priced, I think, fairly for the most part. It's like $150 or so, and it looked pretty good with what they were aiming for, which was a good way to play these different retro games. And now it looks like they have Capcom on board. Take a look at this. This is posted up over on their website saying Capcom is coming built in to Evercade EXP. 18 amazing games from the legendary publisher have been revealed as the bonus content for the new Evercade EXP handheld console. Now, this is up for pre-order now. It actually just went live a day or two ago. And they have the full list here with 1942, 1943, 1944, Bionic Commando, Captain Commando, Final Fight, Forgotten Worlds, Ghouls and Ghosts, Legendary Wings, Mercs, Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, Strider, Vulgus, then we have Mega Man 2, Mega Man X, and Breath of Fire. And that's actually a pretty good collection for the different games that they could pull from with Capcom and trying to have variety in there. I think for the Mega Man games, Mega Man 2 and Mega Man X are good selections, and I guess you just throw the original Mega Man in there just for introduction's sake. I don't know, they had to pick another Mega Man game and they went with the first one. But Mega Man 2 and then X, really good classic Mega Man titles in there. But the one issue that people are running into, and what Evercade's kind of built everything on, is the fact that you could buy physical cartridge that we're not reliant on, well, what we currently have with gaming, which is an internet connection and DRM checks and all this. Well, we have a bit of an explanation from them over on Twitter, where they say, for those that are asking, physical is still our primary outlet, and we'll continue to produce cartridges. This is specifically a bonus for the Evercade EXP, and currently the only way we could bring Capcom to you at this time. We hope this opens the doors for future carts. So most likely this was something where Capcom was like, all right, you know what? We wouldn't mind giving you the games to put on this system, but we don't really feel like getting involved with cartridges and the logistics around shipping these out and getting all this done with licensing. We'd rather make it a bit easier and just package in with each one of your systems. Now, of course, I'm sure there was still payment involved there for licensing and everything, but it seems like this is just kind of Evercade doing their best with the situation they're in with Capcom. So it's better to have the games there than not, and hey, it's 18 games that comes with the handheld that you're spending $150 on, so right out of the gate, you're in pretty good shape with stuff to play. However, if Evercade can make this work and it sells well, maybe they can go back to Capcom and do a Mega Man collection or a Street Fighter collection or just a Capcom collection in general and pull other games into like a single cartridge of like 15 to 20 games. That would be pretty cool, and they can, of course, then continue to build on this handheld platform that they have here. So I'm going to take a look at one of these. We'll do it in a video. I think it'll be a lot of fun. With pre-orders going live, I'll go ahead and try to grab one of those. Like I said, they're live on their website, $150, and based on some of the specs they've shown and what they're attempting to accomplish, I think it looks pretty solid. Next up, let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077, which had a very rough launch. It got absolutely crushed online, and for good reason, with some of the versions they released of the game that barely worked, if at all, on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and just the overall glitchy nature of the game. Basically, if they had waited an extra year or so, I think it would have come out in much better shape, and the reception, I think, would have been better overall. But they are, of course, continuing forward to produce content for this game, and they dropped a teaser yesterday for their next big story expansion. We can see this video. It's just under a minute long, and it is certainly set up as a teaser for the game. They don't really explain a lot of what's happening here, but they did give us one indication at the end that this will be specifically for the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles. It looks like they are dropping the PS4 and the Xbox One going forward, and that kind of makes sense based on what we've seen with those systems just attempting to play like the base Cyberpunk 2077. If they're going to continue to build on top of this for years to come, eventually they have to separate themselves from that Xbox One VCR. And of course, Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty will be going to PC as well. It also looks like Keanu Reeves will be reprising his role as Johnny Silverhand, and they did talk about a complete overhaul of the police system and overhauled vehicle-to-vehicle combat. So that we'll see how all that works out. There's also an update that is live right now for Cyberpunk 2077. It's an Edge Runner update or a version 1.6. Adds Roach Race minigame. There's Martinez Jacket, Transmog, new Ripper Doc editions, new photo mode editions. And the thing that I noticed is when this announcement went out, people were pretty excited for it. And it's definitely a turnaround from when the game first came out to where we are now. It took a lot. Like, they had to work on this game for over a year after it came out to get to a decent position for the title. But it seems like as I see more and more people go back to trying out the game for the first time or returning to it, they seem pretty happy with what they're getting out of it. And I'll admit, I have not fired this game up in a while, and I might do so after this update, which just went live, just to check back in with it, right? To see where it is and what some of the updates have been able to do to it. And I'm certainly going back to the game to try out this new story expansion, and that's kind of the way it goes. Over time, I feel like people start to forget about the launch of this title, and sure, they could eventually come around to Cyberpunk 2077 just being a really good game. It's unfortunate that it got out of the gate the way it did, and the way that they treated the release, especially with not really showing what they were putting out there with the last-gen versions of the title and then all of the glitches and stuff around it. I would have preferred them to hold off on releasing it and it come out in a better state so that they didn't have to try to rebuild goodwill and, well, their stock value for the last year or two. But we'll see what happens when this new expansion releases next year. I'll certainly be checking it out. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about God of War Ragnarok, which is one of my most anticipated titles to end 2022. And we had some new footage for it, some gameplay, but it's only about 90 seconds long. This was over on Game Informer. You can see some of it here. And I mean, they showed off a new area. That's the Svartalheim level, and it looks really good. Like when they're pulling up with their boat to the city, you hear Trey say, "Wow, now this is a city." And yes, I really like the design of it, the look, and they show off, I guess, more puzzle mechanics in the game, and I'm curious if they're gonna be leaning heavily into that as they show. We see Kratos kind of knocking down like a water pillar with his ice axe, using his chains to kind of grab onto certain parts. So it's unfortunate that it's only 90 seconds long. I know Game Informer, they mentioned they have like 4 or 5 minutes of gameplay footage, and seems like they're getting everything they can out of those 4 or 5 minutes. I'm still curious why they haven't shown a ton of God of War Ragnarok so far, and I am wondering if there is a certain twist somewhere in the early parts of the game that would maybe give something away, whether it's Kratos running around with Thor's hammer on his side or something like that, or maybe just a character completely missing. A lot of questions, I'd say, still about God of War Ragnarok, but it sounds like we're going to be exploring all 9 realms, so if anything, it's going to be a pretty sizable game. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, have you played Cyberpunk 2077? And I was really curious how many people would say no, and that comes in at 58%. The reason I'm curious about that is those are all people who didn't play it when it launched and may have a completely different opinion from people who did at that time, like checking it out after the patches or expansion or who knows, a complete edition releases. That's something I want to see as it goes through, right? As Cyberpunk 2077 continues to trudge along, because CD Projekt Red will keep working on it. They'll keep adding content with these major expansions, and eventually they'll have a complete edition that has all of the patches and content maybe on one disc. So at that time, I'm curious if they end up with the No Man's Sky reversal, where at the end of it, people just see this as a very beloved game and they kind of forget about how it launched, or at least have forgiven CD Projekt Red as to how it launched. There's still, I think, a lot of work to be done, though. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from NES Transmission. Says, I do wonder if Microsoft could release a beta test, or Nintendo's marketing a test fire for a future COD game that is only available on Xbox Game Pass. Afterwards, the game would release day and date everywhere, but something like that could clearly shift COD's core platform demographic. Yeah, I think Microsoft's gonna do everything they can outside of taking the game away from PlayStation platforms, at least for the foreseeable future. Like I said, who knows where we are 10 years from now, but everything you're seeing right now with PlayStation, with the marketing and how they do the beta on PlayStation first, and then the next weekend it goes to other platforms, Microsoft will do all that stuff. They're probably taking notes right now as to what's working for PlayStation and what they'll use for their platform being Game Pass 2 years from now when that marketing deal runs up. So yeah, I'm sure they'll go crazy with all kinds of ideas to make you want to come to Game Pass for Call of Duty content in some way outside of just making it completely exclusive to the platform. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was Ubisoft's Forward event being heavily focused on Assassin's Creed. Are you excited to hear about any one of these titles? Let me know. And then also, what about the Evercade EXP handheld gaming console now coming with a bunch of Capcom games? And then Cyberpunk 2077. Have you had a bit of a turnaround on this game since it released to now hearing about this big story expansion? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.